Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the P.e.a.c.e Baltimore podcast with your host, Yuripsi Morgan, and Giovanni Patterson. So, Giovanni, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened this week. In particular, we again made national headlines, although not for the Orioles this time, not just for the Orioles. There was a horrific murder that occurred in the Mount Vernon neighborhood of Baltimore City. And as this story started to unfold, we found out that this suspect was a suspect in another crime. So what we're talking about is the death of a 26-year-old CEO tech. She was a Johns Hopkins student, and then she graduated, decided to stay in Baltimore, make Baltimore home. We all know that Baltimore is not, it's not like Silicon Valley, it's not a tech hub. But this young woman, well, it is becoming, right? And it certainly could be now, but it's not like Silicon Valley. This young woman was here. She had clearly a love for the city, but also a love for industry and tech. And she had created this kind of really cool business venture, had hired about 30 people, and then was brutally murdered. I believe the report said that her body was found partially closed, blunt force trauma on the roof of her building. And it was a secure building. On the roof of the building is what the police reports are saying. Yeah, I mean, it was horrific. And then as more and more details came out, I think the public became more and more concerned. One, because the killer had not been found. Now, since yesterday, the suspect has been apprehended. But for a few days, there were news was trickling out that this young woman's apartment building was fairly secure. Like, we're not talking about, somebody who left their doors, windows open. That's a great question.
Yeah.
How did this person get in? Is it supposed to be a secure apartment? Then here's where it gets even worse, if that's possible, right? There were news reports that this person, was suspected of having been involved in another horrific crime. So about a week before, apparently, in West Baltimore, there was a man and woman, apparently, as the police report says, or as the reports are, that somebody knocked on the door, they didn't answer, and then this person comes charging in, ties up the two individuals, the man and the woman, rapes the woman, cuts them, and then sets them on fire.
Wow.
And it's alleged that these are the same person.
Did this guy have a past or anything? Was this the first time he's been in, is this the first time, we've been aware of what he does?
No. As a matter of fact, that was one of the biggest things, and was that this person is a repeat violent offender. Now, he did serve time, but Christina Mendez from Fox 45 did a really good job of detailing his past offenses.
Adult court records reveal when Billingsley began to rack up convictions. At 18 years old, Billingsley pleaded guilty to first-degree assault in 2009. He was ultimately given 2 years of supervised probation, but violated the terms and was convicted in a second-degree assault case in 2011, where he would serve a 2-year prison sentence. After being released mere months later in 2013, Billingsley was convicted of a rape attempt. The sentence was 30 years, meaning a 2043 release, but records show 16 years of that sentence was suspended, and he was given 5 years probation.
So here's the crazy thing, right? You asked if this person had been in the criminal justice system before, right? The answer is yes. 2009, 2011, assaults, like we're talking violent crimes here.
For the same thing.
Yes, and then...
For similar crimes.
Well, for similar crimes, yes. In 2015, he was convicted of a violent sexual offense. So here's what happens in the Maryland system. There have been some questions about who to blame for this instance, right? Because one, we weren't supposed to know. This guy was convicted in 2015, which means we should not have been even discussing this man at least until what's 30 years plus that, 2045.
Yeah.
He should not be on our radar. However, there are two ways that you can get a conviction. One is if the defendant, right, if I'm accused of something, I can either plea, I can, and that means that the state's attorney, assistant state's attorney, and my defense attorney, and myself, we come to an agreement, hey, we will offer you this, right, and the judge can either agree or not agree, or we can go to trial and, it's anybody's game at that point. And so apparently what happened in this case is that there was a bargain that was struck. There was a plea agreement that gave him, of the 13 years, he would have all but 14 suspended, which means 16 years were suspended.
So what could be in a plea that would make something like that happen, though?
Well, this is where, like I said, you can get a conviction one of two ways, right? Once you get a conviction, Then you move on to sentencing. If you don't have a conviction, you don't talk about sentencing. The problem in this case, as has been outlined, was that according to the assistant state's attorney, the witness did not want to testify. If the witness doesn't, or the victim doesn't testify in that 2015 case, right? If the witness doesn't testify, then you may have a more difficult time proving your case, which means you may not get a conviction, and you may not even talk about sentencing, right? However, transcripts were obtained by I think it was the Baltimore Banner, of that 2015 court hearing where the judge himself said, I do not like this deal. You need to be getting more jail time.
Really?
However, it really is a question of what the state can prove. But let's think about what was going on in 2015.
Yeah.
Who was the state's attorney in 2015?
Miss Mosby.
Miss Marilyn Mosby.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that she didn't have a difficult time getting witnesses to testify. Of course she did. What was one of the biggest reasons, do you think, why witnesses don't want to testify in Baltimore City?
Probably intimidation.
Yeah, intimidation. And there were all kinds of questions swirling about money that the state had provided to the city to help witnesses, right, to relocate them. There were millions of dollars that were set aside for that purpose. But then also there's the fact that if you're a witness or a victim in a crime, I can understand why people would be hesitant to testify because there's no guarantee that that person's going to stay behind bars.
Right. So we have people that are scared to testify because of retaliation, right? Especially when violent repeat offenders are back on the streets.
Yeah.
Right. It's especially so quickly now.
It's like a cycle,
right?
Right.
So
you're afraid to testify against them, so perhaps they don't get the conviction or the sentencing that they deserve, which means they're back out on the streets faster. But people are afraid that if they do testify and the conviction isn't secured, or for whatever reason they don't get the sentencing that they deserve, they're still back out on the streets.
So how do we address that? Like, is there anything we can do to fix it, or whose problem is it?
Well, there have been pieces of legislation like the Repeat Violent Offenders Act, that have tried to legislate more jail time for people who are repeat violent offenders. Take it off the backs of witnesses and put it back on the defendant to say, no, like, you are a repeat violent offender. You are terrorizing communities. And now we see what happens. And just so we're clear, Maryland also has this kind of a mandated system where you are supposed to serve a certain amount of your sentence. I believe it's about 80% of your sentence that you're supposed to serve. But then there's what's called diminution credits. So for good behavior and following the rules and certain work requirements that you have in jail, education requirements, things like that, if you participate in that, you can get basically credits off of your time, which is how this guy ended up not even serving the full 14 years that he was sentenced to. And so he is back out on the streets.
So he's out based on good behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
The irony, right?
The irony. Now, there's another aspect to this too, Giovanni, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Did you hear anything about an arrest warrant for somebody who tied people up and set them on fire before this?
No, we haven't heard this at all. And I would think, this would be something that would be blasted out. I think, even what I heard from the, I think he's still acting police commissioner, was a threat that he's saying, we're going to find you, we're going to find you. Why didn't we hear any of that beforehand as well, right? Especially with someone as dangerous as this. And from what I've heard on the street is that, he was hanging down on Howard Street, trying to pick up dates. And this was kind of another avenue of the way he was, kind of choosing people that he would go after. And, quite frankly, we still may not know, what else he may have been involved in, right?
Oh, you're right.
There still may be some other victims out there, if the guy is doing the things that people claim that he was doing.
Well, listen, there was a press conference at which the mayor, the state's attorney, Ivan Bates, and the acting commissioner, Rich Worley, were a part of. And I can tell you that when I heard the clip of the acting commissioner say, he will kill, he will rape. This was his warning to the public. And my first thought was, like, that's incredibly serious. Like, that is a huge warning to have to say. But also, I was also thinking, how do you know that? And then when the details came out of the previous arrest warrant, like the week before he allegedly killed this 26-year-old woman, he had been involved in this horrific crime, allegedly, where he tied up, raped a woman, tied up the woman and the man who were in the apartment, cut them, and then set them on fire. Now, my question, is why did the public not hear about that one? To me, if I am the police department and this type of crime that seemingly was random, been no allegation that they knew each other, that there was a backstory there, but it seemed by all accounts that it was some sort of a random crime. Would you not want to alert the public?
I mean, absolutely, I would. But I think a lot of our elected officials want to portray Baltimore as a not safe city. I mean, a safe city, right? We don't want to give that image of being unsafe or that there's danger, lurking around the corner, which in the literal case, this was what's happening with this guy. So, I think a lot of our elected officials want to present this other narrative instead of what's really going on, within the city of Baltimore. And I think, this Mayor Scott always talks about being transparent and having some level of accountability. Well, how is this a demonstration of that accountability and that transparency?
I think we have a very different definition of transparency. But you're right. And listen, I think it's more important not to feel safe, but to be safe.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what's not going on here. Okay. So the public didn't know about it. There was, 1 week less of concern or panic, if you will. But how would people have changed their behavior had they known that this sort of criminal was out on the loose and that he had a history, right?
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about somebody who suddenly woke up one day at 32 years old and said, I'm going to commit this crime. He had a history of that. And I can tell you, as a 5'3" woman, I probably wouldn't be walking around these in the city.
Right.
My office is in a parking garage, it's attached to a parking garage in the city. I can tell you, I probably would be leaving a little bit earlier during the day. And I normally watch my back. It's just things that you're taught as, in general, right? But I think I would have had a different approach.
Now, but has Mayor Scott said anything about this, though?
He there was a press conference, and he actually did. He discussed the issue of repeat violent offenders, of course. Here's more from that.
We have to make sure that folks are held accountable in every single way, because we are tired of talking about the same people committing the same kind of crimes over and over again.
So am I.
So, he keeps saying that he's tired, right? In every press conference he does this. I'm tired of, people shooting each other over just petty beefs, or I'm tired of repeat violent offenders being that. Like, at what point does the being tired of turn to we're going to take action for, right?
Yeah.
We keep hearing the same thing, and quite frankly, I'm tired of hearing
how tired
Scott.
You are.
but I said this after the Brooklyn Day Holmes mass shooting. Is that there needs to be an after action report for what led up to that event as well, and there needs to be an after action report to all the things that have gone into this this Jason Billingsley issue as well, right? What stances and policies have we been set forth to really enable these repeat violent offenders? What policies and especially with Marilyn Mosby, we're not going to prosecute certain low level crimes. What stances have been created this environment that where one, people feel unsafe. Two, people don't want to report because there's no consequences. Well, there's two things, right? They're afraid of retaliation, and there's no consequences. Police aren't arresting people because they're going to be right back out on the street 15 minutes later, right? So there needs to be a full after action report on everything that has led up to the current criminal environment.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. Although I will say that with the new state's attorney Ivan Bates, thankfully there is a new approach to prosecuting violent criminals in Baltimore City. But there are simple things that can be done. The mayor who has been, the mayor like a lot of other county executives and stuff, they routinely support certain legislation in Annapolis during the General Assembly. Well, there is the Repeat Violent Offenders Act, that could help take the burden off of victims and put it back on the judiciary, which is where it belongs.
And how much support did Mayor Scott give to the Repeat Violent Offenders Act?
None, as have very few. I mean, I don't know of any Baltimore City legislators who have supported that legislation.
So how tired can he really be?
Look, I mean, that's the frustrating thing. You can be as tired as you want to be, but if you're not willing to do something about it, then, you know. But here's another question for you. We're going to move on in just a second, but I have one more question on this topic. Where is the governor on this issue? And listen, I don't believe that Governor Westmore should be commenting on everything that happens in Baltimore City, but I seem to remember that after Westmore won this election and we got rid of that, horrible, racist, whatever else they called Larry Hogan, that suddenly, and I don't agree with those things, but I'm just saying he was called all kinds of things. There was clearly some beef between him and the mayor. And then when Westmore came in, there was a lot of hand-holding, a lot of, we finally have a partner.
Kumbaya.
Yes. First, the governor took 3 days to be present in Brooklyn, right, after the Brooklyn Homes mass shooting. And as far, I checked his Twitter this morning, there's not been a single comment. There was a comment about the O's, go O's. He was at the Taz Crab Festival, which is a political event, eating pretty big crabs.
Yeah.
What
Look,
about this?
I don't expect him to respond to everything, but when you see this make national news, there's generally some response from the leader of the state, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, this murder has made national news. This one in particular, right? I mean, she ran a 7-figure company, right here based in Baltimore, and this killer, apparently he was on a spree, right? And he's a repeat violent offender right here in Maryland, under the Maryland judicial system, in a Maryland city of Baltimore. So when something makes national news like that, yes, you want to be in front of it, in front of that issue. But I will say this too, because to me, every life matters. They talk about the homicides in terms of, okay, we had 300 this year. Oh, we only had 200 this year. Well, every one of those people, every one of those numbers is a person, right? And I think there should be a press conference time given to every single one, right? Because until we have to face the sheer amount of homicides that are truly happening and the amount of crime that's happening in Baltimore,
The trauma.
The trauma, like it just gets swept under the rug,
Yeah.
right? So,
and I agree with you, but kind of back on the governor thing, it's like, I don't think it would be such an issue if they hadn't made such a show of unity when Westmore was elected governor. There was a purposeful show that now you have an advocate in the governor's mansion, whereas apparently you didn't before. And this, when you start hearing the details of what this man is accused of doing, both in West Baltimore and then to this 26-year-old woman, when you hear those details. This was horrific. The details were horrific, which is why it made national news. And I don't think that, the governor should be led by what goes on at the national level. But let's be honest. I mean, he seems to almost have a standing time slot at CNN these days. Yeah. So no comment on this?
It's not important.
It's ridiculous. Well, we're going to move on. We're going to talk next about this issue of bike lanes and who actually wants them.
Yep.
This is a reminder that if you like what you hear, you can always follow us on our mailing site. You can join at our website. It's peacebaltimore.com, and that's P.e.a.c.e, baltimore.com. You can join our mailing list, stay up to date on all the things that we're doing in the community.
All right, Yoripsy. So yesterday I attended a small rally in the Remington neighborhood, and they're over there. They recently had some changes to the design, the road layout. There's this area of Baltimore called the Big Jump, which connects Drew Hill Park over to Remington, but it's also the off ramp to 83. So you can imagine there's a lot of traffic, particularly during rush hour and things like that. So recently, the traffic pattern has changed over there, where they're essentially solidifying and installing bike lanes between the Big Jump and connecting it a little bit further through Remington and down 28th Street. But if you ask, if you go on social media, the GRIA Neighborhood Association says, well, the people wanted this, this was supported by the community. However, yesterday there was a protest in the same neighborhood, Greater Remington, so at the Fringe Hair Salon, where people are expressing that they didn't support this.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is the addition of bike lanes, right?
Yeah, the addition of bike lanes, particularly some ways to implement traffic calming. So the young lady by the name of Laura Schneider, she owns the hair salon called Fringe Hair Salon, and
it's a great salon.
Yeah, she actually has. Have you been there?
I've seen, I've seen some reviews. I work in the city, so occasionally, I'm looking for places where I can go that I don't have to go all the way back to Anne Arundel County.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I've looked at them because they have really great reviews.
Awesome. Well, they told me to come back and they paint my hair blue. but there was some people with some nice hair over there, right?
Yeah.
So, but so she there was this protest, being held yesterday to demonstrate how. The way this was implemented was not done, one, in an equitable manner, and two, really with the approval, with the really buy-in of the community. So what she claimed is like this was done, really secretly, and only going with the support of certain individuals to make it appear as if, it gained full community support. And so this protest was held because the way they've cut the street up right in front of her shop, one, they eliminated about 12 parking spots. And two, she has MS, right? And she's, sometimes, disabled, and, there's a wheelchair ramp right next to that curb. But the street is like the cars are really coming right next to that curb. Right.
It basically eliminated one of those handicap parking spaces.
Well, not just eliminating the handicap spots. You can't get the wheelchairs up the ramp without bumping into a car right behind you that's moving.
Yeah. Which honestly, you wonder if there's an ADA violation there, the Americans with Disability Act. But here's the thing, this is not the first protest that we have seen in the city. A couple of weeks ago, actually it was in August. I remember it was really hot then, Giovanni, but there was another protest that you and I attended together for the same thing.
Yep.
And here's the issue, and the woman that you spoke with, the owner of Fringe, said she is a biker. She is a biker. Yes, she is a cyclist. She is a cyclist.
Yeah.
She is very supportive of it, but you wouldn't know it from all the things that people have called her. And the one connection that I keep hearing from the protest that you attended and the one that you and I attended is that people are not against bicycles. They're not against bike lanes per se. They're against not being asked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Their transportation being completely upended. So, let me put it this way: there is one person who can come in and tell me what to do in my house. It's not my husband; it's my mother. But that's my mom, right? And even with my mom, it's like my mom lives with us now. We finally got her to move up here. Occasionally she'll say things like, "Oh, you're not going to put any meat in the fridge. You're not putting any meat in the sink. Okay, fine." Or it'd be really great is if you had towels here. And then
she makes little nudges, right?
Oh yeah, nudge. Then she just goes and puts towels wherever she wants. Right. But that's my mother.
Yeah.
I would never go into somebody's home and start telling them how to live their lives.
Yep.
And when you and I go around as part of our organization, p.e.a.c.e, we're doing town halls in all 15 council districts to hear from residents, because the next question K is not going to come from you and me.
Right.
The next question K is going to come from what we hear in the community. Complete Streets and this whole bike lane thing does the complete opposite.
Yep.
They are walking into neighborhoods and saying, to heck with what you want. Here is what we feel is equitable. Here's what we think you need, without even listening to residents.
Yeah. So, and you make a great point. I get tired of people saying, "I know what's best for you," without asking me. Right.
Right.
How do you know? Tomatoes are best for me. I might be allergic to acid or something. I don't know. It's
very condescending.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can tie my own shoes. Thank you.
Right. Right. But the way this Complete Streets, and I think it's very important to understand, how this Complete Streets ordinance came about, because it was done so in a way that really didn't include all of the residents of Baltimore. but it affects all of the residents of Baltimore. So this bill was introduced back in, I think, 20. Well, let me go back because it was introduced as a resolution back as early as 2009. To say, hey, there's a national model that we can, adopt to have better layouts of our streets, do urban planning, urban design, have some kind of principles, incorporate some things like bike lanes when we go to redesign, but it's still up to the local jurisdiction, up to the needs of the neighborhood to make those decisions. So there was a resolution put in place, but then in 2017, Ryan Dorsey said, this didn't go far enough.
And Ryan Dorsey is Councilman Ryan Dorsey, who is obsessed with bike lanes.
Yes.
But go ahead.
Well, the whole basis of his election was through the group Bike More, which is essentially a political advocacy group to help get people in office that advocate for certain transportation policy, right? And Bike More really helped get Ryan Dorsey, over the hump and get elected, and really drafted this complete streets legislation. Now, the complete streets legislation, while it's not, I understand the intent of it, it's too prescriptive in its language, and what it does is it forces these things on every neighborhood, right? So it doesn't incorporate the needs of the neighborhood. So now Department of Transportation is required by law to do these things.
Right. And part of what it has mandated is that they're supposed to have 77 miles of separated bike lanes. So that's really the big issue, right? You have this national organization who is saying, what would be really great is if we got rid of cars for the most part and made cities more pedestrian. So walking, biking, those sorts of things. It's a very kind of green program, which is, all fine and well. Most of I like biking. But it does not take into account reality. No. And it doesn't take into account equity. It says it does, but it has a completely different definition of equity. So specifically here in Baltimore, a lot of this particular organization is very upset because the city has not accomplished the 77 miles of separated bike lanes. Yeah. And so they're trying to push more bike lanes into residential neighborhoods, like the commercial areas. And what you have are people saying, whoa, 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 whoa. First of all, I didn't ask for this bike lane. Yep. Second of all, I can't now get to my home. I can't get to my place of business. Yep. It's taking way longer because traffic is congested everywhere because you put in bike lanes for all three people who use bikes on a weekly basis. It's not fit. It doesn't fit. And one of the most offensive things that I think you and I have heard is from residents who say, so if you kind of go back to this original purpose of this national organization, you want everybody to, I get it, we want to reduce pollution, but you want everybody to bike. How unpractical is that? You have kids. Yeah. I have kids. Yeah. I have to go to the grocery store. Just think about the logistics. You have a bicycle. And now these folks want you to use that bicycle as your primary, if not exclusive, mode of transportation. Yep. What are you going to do when your kids get sick, Giovanni?
You're going to put them on there.
Put them on the back of the bike?
Yep.
Bicycle, mind you. I'm not talking about a moped or a motorcycle. No, a bicycle. How many times do you have to go to the grocery store now? Because how much can you carry on your bicycle?
Well, all these, I don't know, some of the bike advocates say, well, you can do it. You just need.
Right. When? Where? Because as a woman,
you got to go to the bike every day. I mean, grocery store every day.
Oh, yes, you have to go to the grocery store every day. And I can tell you, as a woman who already has, I'm at work. I've got to make sure I'm home for the kids. I've got to get dinner on the table. There's a whole host, and it's not just me.
And don't have kids that play sports.
Right. Exactly.
Don't have kids that play sports or, traveling teams or anything like that. What are you going to do then?
And transportation, let's be very clear about this, right? Transportation equals opportunity. The reason, I've never seen a show where somebody is given a bike and it's, news. No. Yeah. What ends up happening is that there was, the janitor or single mom who was walking to her job or was taking the bus 2 hours each way. And then, residents or whoever, friends gather money and they're able to purchase a car for her. You know why that's so exciting? Okay. Because she can now get from point A to point B in a comfortable, reliable manner.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that bikes are not a part of transportation. They certainly are. And we should encourage people where we can. But can we have a dose of reality here?
Yeah. Yeah, we should. And I'm going to just throw this out there too. Cars are a modern American, marvel. right? It's something that we created here. You just like want to destroy something that, it's like it's American as apple pie, a car,
Yeah.
right? And that,
A
it's part
vehicle
of,
going,
right.
yeah.
That's it's part of the American dream, and like, I got family in South Carolina. I'm not getting there on a bike. You know,
Exactly, yeah.
having a form of transportation I choose is part of, the American way.
Yeah.
But I also want to, just kind of important, because what happens too is that we're starting to see a federal control over local policy, right? And it's happening through these nonprofit advocacy groups, right? So there's the group Smart Growth America. That's the one that's really over a lot of these, local transportation policy. If we go on their website, they state how many cities across the country have adopted, one of their smart growth cities, or smart growth policies rather. And if you look, one of the cities that have adopted, along with Baltimore, is South Bend, Indiana. South Bend, Indiana's former mayor was a
Pete
guy by the
Buttigieg.
name of Pete
Pete
Buttigieg.
Buttigieg, yeah.
Pete
Who is now the
Buttigieg,
transportation secretary.
who is now the transportation secretary. So what these people are doing
It's all
are,
making sense
are
now.
strategically putting people in places to have federal control over local policy. And what you're doing is now you're putting key people in places and everywhere, right, to implement this policy. So now you have the transportation secretary, Buttigieg, and now you have locally people like Jed Weeks, who's over, Bike More and some of the other bike advocacy organizations who are putting people in place like Ryan Dorsey to adopt this transportation policy, and now even them are putting people in place in departments like Department of Transportation. Because if you now look on Department of Transportation's website,
Yeah.
they were originally opposed to the Complete Streets legislation, but now they're 100% on board because now they've been infiltrated with people of the same, ilk, if you will. So
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to see that, because it's not just,
It
this
feels
is a
like
Bike Lane's issue.
Yeah.
That's not the issue. The fact is that our local government and local control is being taken over by this federal policy that a lot of people do not want.
Yeah, if it feels like it came out of nowhere, it's because it did. So we're going to move on to the next topic. There is an interesting development in the city of Dallas. The mayor did something very interesting. We're going to talk about that coming up next.
We'd like to thank the sponsor of this week's episode, Patterson and Associates Financial Group, creating generational wealth one family at a time. You can visit them online at www.pandafg.com.
All right, Giovanni. So I got to tell you about this story out in Dallas, Texas. Now, I'm from Texas. 2 hours east of Dallas, actually, is where I grew up. But they've had this very interesting mayor there. Dallas does something interesting where they don't actually run as a Republican or Democrat, but
I think it's good.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the school boards
Yeah.
in Anne Arundel County, where they're nonpartisan, but everybody knows who the Republican
yeah.
and the Democrat is.
Yeah.
He actually just recently switched parties. He is no longer a Democrat. He is now a Republican. Now, here's the crazy thing, and I want to reiterate this, right? P.e.a.c.e is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse either political party, and we certainly, we're not going around trying to convert people to become Republicans or to vote Republicans. It's not that at all. But what is interesting is that we hear a lot in the community what people want, right? When we are at town halls, we want repeat violent offenders. We want people to go to jail, right? We want responsible spending. We want transparency in spending. We want, government to not be all in our business all the time.
Yeah. They want more money in their pockets.
Exactly. And they're
want to be able to
upset
afford a
about the
house.
schools. Yeah, they're upset about the schools. But a lot of what we hear are not things that the current administration and the current political party, so Democrats have been in charge of Baltimore City for over 50 years. And when I say in charge, I mean Republicans have not been on the city council.
Yep.
There hasn't been a mayor Republican in over 50 years. We are basically a fly on the wall. Republicans are basically a fly on the wall in Baltimore. And I bring that up because, again, we're nonpartisan. I want to be very clear about that. But what's interesting is that, very similarly, in Dallas, a lot of what people seem to have wanted, like here in Baltimore, are not what the current political establishment, the Democratic Party, are selling them.
Right.
And so this mayor has decided to switch parties. So CNN senior political correspondent Abby Phillip had the opportunity to interview the Democratic Party chairman of the Dallas Democratic Party. I think I got all that right. His name is Cardell Coleman. And she asked him about the mayor switch.
The city of Dallas, he's been leading the city of Dallas for some years now. The murders are down in the city for over 15% over the last 2 years. Rapes are down 40%. Robberies are down nearly 30%. Aggravated assaults have declined 5%. It seems like his approach is working, but his approach actually has been characterized by kind of being at odds with Democrats in the city. So how is he wrong to take a different approach from the party that he has been affiliated with?
So actually, again, that was Abby Phillip. That was not, she was speaking with the Democratic Party chair, but she's asking him, like, wait a second, like what he did is working, and what he did, his policies seem to be at odds with the Democratic Party. So how is he wrong here?
So I actually think, she did a fantastic job, pushing back and challenging him. But I think it's important that we start seeing that it is policy over party, right? And again, that's why, just to reiterate, what you were saying at the beginning is people want good policy, right? And oftentimes, if you're rejecting that policy just to play on a certain team, you're really an enemy to the people, right? So, are we just picking teams now, or do we want the policy to be effective for the people that elect us, that that put the people in office, and it's starting to seem like it's just all about what side you're on, and that's talking about Democrats and Republicans, right? Yeah. And I think that's why it's important with peace. We're focused on good policy, like what helps create more safety in your community, right? What puts more money back in your pocket, right? What provides the most opportunities for your neighborhood, your environment, your business to grow right here in Baltimore, right? And I think, those are the questions that should be asked instead of what party you belong to.
Right. I think that's also why the independents are the largest growing political segment in the country, not just here in Maryland, but in the country as a whole, because a lot of people are saying, I don't like you guys. I don't like you guys. Yeah. What we want is good government, right?
Yes.
And so she pressed him a little bit on this, and here's more from that interview.
And you don't think it's working, even though the data seems to show that it might be?
I believe that the data seems to point to that fact. However, if it is working, why now switch teams? That's the question.
So again, it's not about the policy, right? So he's admitting the policies are working, right? And he's also
mad
admitting
about the team now.
he's also admitting that the policies have gone against what the Democrats in the area generally support.
Yeah.
So if those two things are true, then is it also true that the policies aren't for the people of Dallas?
Yeah. Well, you'll notice in that clip there, he says, okay, if those things are true, then why would you switch to parties now? Like, because it's not about the party. It's about what you are doing. And if what you were doing, like the most basic way to say this is if the shoe fits, just put it on, buy it in every color.
Wear it. Yeah.
But right now, it's the policies that, when you and I go to these town halls and when we talk to people, the number of times that I hear people say, where are the police? We want more police here. And this has been going on since at least like 2018 that I've been hearing this. People are upset. There is crime in my community. I want to see the police here. But then you hear these activists that are saying, no, defund the police. We don't want the police. Yeah. And I'm thinking, have you talked to the folks? Have you actually been in the community? Because they are saying the complete opposite of what you are pushing for and advocating for.
Absolutely. And again, this is why I say like an after action report is needed for all those policies that have been put in place, is because the people are asking for good government. Mm-hmm. People are asking, we want safety on our streets. We want the bad cops gone. We want the criminals gone.
Right.
Right.
It's not either or. It is both.
It's both, right? We want to be able to walk down the street safely to send our kids to the school on our block because it's a good school, right? We want to be able to create businesses in our neighborhoods in the same area where we own the homes that we live in. That is what people want.
Yeah, but it does not seem to be what certain political establishments want. So, she had the Democratic, this is again Abby Phillips, CNN senior political anchor, and she was speaking with the Democratic Democratic Party chairman of Dallas, because the Dallas mayor suddenly just became a Republican. He was a Democrat before. And so she talked to him about his approach. And here's what he had to say.
Well, things have been working in Dallas, right? Not only these numbers or these metrics, but we have to also include community policing, conversations with our neighbors. We have been doing that type of work. And so to take a pivot right now at this time, we have to ask the critical question, why now? What is it that's on the other end of this that you're not being transparent about with voters?
Yeah, and he has apparently been governing outside of the Democratic establishment. So he was a Democrat, but it sounds like his policies were at odds with the Democratic Party, which is why he decided to switch. And now this the Democratic Party chairman, Cardell Coleman, is saying, well, why did he decide to switch now? I don't know.
Look, I wonder if he was actually pushed out, though, right? Because if he's been governing this, same way for 4 years now, and this is he's in his second term now. And again, he's admitted, and the reporter asks, your policies go against what the Democrats generally support, right? And he may have been pushed out, and they're making this big, the hubbub. I don't know how you say that word, but they're making this big,
big fuss,
fuss for nothing, right? Because, look, I mean, if I know anything about some of the way some of these political parties work. It can be real catty and real grimy, right? And that's a big reason why I stay out of a lot of the political apparatus here locally and in the state, is because it's like you guys do so much infighting, right? That you really aren't focused on the people. So I could imagine a situation where this guy, because of the way he's governing, and because he's going against the status quo, as being, a registered Democrat, he's being pushed away.
I'm guessing that his Christmas cards were getting less and less every year, But here's the thing, right? So, like, we talk about how this affects Baltimore in particular. Well, and again, we can't stress this enough that P.e.a.c.e is a nonpartisan organization. But I will tell you this: you're married, Giovanni. I'm married. I love my husband dearly. I think he is amazing. I also don't agree with that man on everything that he says. If you walk into our house at any given time, we might not agree on, what we're having for dinner, what time the kids are going to bed, all kinds of stuff. But that's normal in a marriage, right? Yeah. For whatever reason, that kind of thinking goes out the window when it comes to politics. And all of a sudden, you have people who it's almost like they are married to their political party, but more so than you would be to your spouse, because they vote 100% with their party, or they are 100% in lockstep with their political party. You and I wouldn't even have that type of relationship with our spouses. What makes you think? And here's the even worst part about it, right? Is that you have people who will go to the George Moore, and they will vote either Republican till the day they die, or they will vote Democrat till the day they die. Yeah. But I am telling you right now, that political party will not give you the same loyalty.
Absolutely.
And that's not to say that you shouldn't have a political affiliation. You do, I do. But I'm just saying, like, understand what you're getting out of this relationship and what they are getting out of it. Yeah. And the reality is that if the policies are not working for you, your family, individually, right? Not the candidate, but you individually. Because, like, let's be honest, they don't know you from a hole in the wall. Yeah. And if their policies aren't helping you, then maybe it's time, like the mayor of Dallas did, to say, it's been real. Yeah. But I'm out.
So let me share this final story too. Like, we had an election cycle in 2022, and during that election cycle, my parents live in South Carolina, and I got a note from my dad, and it was one of the most, I guess, like, heartwarming notes, because it was around election season. He texted me saying, "Hey man, based on just some of the things that you're doing, and and how you're just sharing more with me. It was the first time in my life where where he's talking about he voted, just differently, right? When I grew up, my parents, told me, when I asked what is a Democrat, was a Republican, they said, well, Democrats for the black people and Republicans for the rich. I look down, I'm black and I ain't rich, so there's one choice for me, right? So that's kind of how I grew up. And when I started, being more active, getting involved with peace, we pushed for Question K. My dad, he sent me that note saying, hey, I see the stuff that you post on Facebook. I see the stuff that you're saying and you're talking about. And it's, is this time when I went to the ballot, I really, did my research on who the candidates were. And, this is the first time I didn't vote straight down the line. Like I made the conscious choices for each candidate. And, I think that's important when you start to evaluate policy, over the party. And, there's some things that, you might vote for a Democrat on, but there's other things you might vote for a Republican on, right? We have to be very keen on the policies that they support, particularly when those policies are affecting our everyday lives, our pockets, safety in our communities, the schools,
Yeah.
All those things.
Don't believe anybody who tells you that all Republicans and all Democrats are the same, because they are not. They are not. There are different degrees of Democrats, right? And different degrees of Republicans, because you'll find folks that, progressives can be are like night and day to your moderate Democrats, your Joe Manchins of the world. They're like night and day. They may as well be Republicans and Democrats. And then you've got people that are full on Trump supporters and people who are not, who support more of the moderate Mitt Romney type folks. So good luck to the mayor of Dallas. I think that what he did by governing by policy, not by political party, is really what makes it successful for the community, which again, if you go into government, that's what it's supposed to be about, right? Yeah. It's about the community, not about you. Yeah. So that's got for us today. But join us next week. Again, we've got your host, Giovanni Patterson, your P.e.a.c.e. Morgan. We're here with Peace Baltimore, and we're going to be bringing you more of the news and more of what we hear from the community next week.